I've long called for comprehensive sanctions on Israel in response to its crimes against the Palestinian people. So the sanctions against two far-right ministers are a step in the right direction. But Israel's war crimes are about far more than a couple of bad apples. So much, much more needs to be done. When Russia invaded Ukraine, over 2,500 sanctions were rightfully imposed on Russia. So I say to the Foreign Minister, isn't it now time for Russia-style sanctions on Israel to help stop the genocide?
I had expected to hear something constructive. What we've actually heard is the sanctioning of two people. The United Kingdom government could unilaterally recognise Palestine. The United Kingdom government could show the world a lead. And above all, the government could, as an absolute priority, negotiate the delivery of food and water and medicine to women and children who in Palestine are starving, through the route from Larnaca direct into Gaza. I asked him last week, I'll ask him again, when is the government going to do something?
But I want to ask the Minister, as I continue to ask him and the Foreign Secretary, why are we still arming Israel? And when will we impose an arms embargo? When will we ban goods from settlements?
Can you reassure the House and all of those that are very concerned about this issue that the United Kingdom government has not done some grubby deal behind the scenes with the American administration, trading this particular set of sanctions today and saying no to recognition in New York next week?
Two sanctioned ministers have been enabled by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is himself subject to an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. I wonder what the government are going to do to make sure that is properly pursued.
Deputy Speaker, the Minister laid out with some passion the dystopian hell that Gaza has become and the unfolding or ongoing disaster in the West Bank. So as many members said, why then has he done absolutely the bare minimum? We all know in this House, after the previous rounds of sanctions, that there will be absolutely no difference on the ground, as others have said, for the Palestinians. And I said last week, and I'm sorry to be cynical about it, that I thought the House was being played. My confident prediction now, given this announcement, is that recognition, which was being advertised for the conference next week, is now off the table. Can he tell me that I'm wrong?
We now come to the statement on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. I call Minister Falconer for the statement. Minister. Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll make a statement on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The two-state solution is in peril. Catastrophic conflict in Gaza and a shocking deterioration in the West Bank. This is an affront to the rights of Palestinians, but it is also against the interests of Israelis, against their long-term security and their democracy. Today, I will update the House on new actions we are taking to uphold human rights and defend the vision and viability of two states living side by side in peace. Mr. Speaker, 2024 saw the worst settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank in the last 2 decades. 2025 is on track to be just as violent. Between 1996 and 2023, an average of 7 illegal settler outposts were established annually. In 2024, settlers erected 59. These outposts are illegal under both Israeli and international law. 2 weeks ago, the Israeli government itself announced 22 new settlements in the West Bank. Every outpost, every building the settlers erect is a flagrant breach of international law. It disregards the views of international partners for Israel, and there are now in excess of 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank. There are over 100,000 in East Jerusalem, the territory that must form the heart of a sovereign, viable, and free Palestine. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the sharp growth in settlements alone is dangerous enough, but it has been accompanied by a steep rise in settler violence and extremist rhetoric. Itamar Ben-Gvir has led 7 provocative intrusions into Haram al-Sharif since 2022. In 2023, settlers rampaged through the village of Huwara, in what Israel's own West Bank military commander described as a pogrom done by outlaws. Last month, the villagers of Mugayir Adir fled their homes in fear after the construction of an illegal outpost 100 metres away. This month, settlers attacked the town of Deir Dagwan. They set fire to houses and injured residents. This violence and rhetoric is deeply concerning, an assault not just on Palestinian communities, but on the very fundamentals of a two-state solution. This is an attempt to entrench a one-state reality where there are no equal rights. The two-state solution remains the only viable framework for a just and lasting peace. I know it is supported on every side of this House. Israelis living in secure borders, recognised and at peace with their neighbours, free from the threat of terrorism, with Palestinians living in their own state, with dignity and security, free of occupation. Mr. Speaker, we are steadfastly committed to defending that vision, not just with words, but with action. That is why we pledged £101 million in additional support to the Palestinian people this year, why we are working to strengthen and reform the Palestinian Authority, why my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, signed a landmark agreement with Prime Minister Mustafa, why my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, welcomed him to Downing Street, why we are clear that Hamas must release the hostages immediately and unconditionally, and that Hamas can have no role in Palestinian governance. It is why we are committed to working with civil society, Israelis and Palestinians, to support those who believe in peace and coexistence. However, Mr. Speaker, the gravity of the situation demands further action. The reality is that these human rights abuses, incitement to violence, extremist rhetoric, comes not just from an uncontrolled fringe, but from individuals who are ministers in this Israeli government. We must hold them to account and protect the viability of the two-state solution. So today we are sanctioning Bezalel, Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. We are acting alongside Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway, who have also announced their own measures today. These two men are responsible for inciting settler violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank, violence which has led to the deaths of Palestinian civilians and the displacement of whole towns and villages. This violence constitutes an abuse of Palestinians' human rights. It is cruel, it is degrading, and it is completely unacceptable. We have told the Israeli government repeatedly that we would take tougher action if this did not stop. It still did not. The appalling rhetoric has continued unchecked. Violent perpetrators continue to act with impunity and with encouragement. So let me tell the House now, when we say something, we mean it. Today we have shown with our partners, two extremists, that we will not sit by while they wreck the prospects of future peace. Mr. Speaker, our actions today do not diminish our support for the security of Israel and the Israeli people. The agendas of these two men are not even supported by the majority of Israelis. Yeah. Israelis recognise that these individuals are not working in their interest. As the Foreign Secretary said to this House last month, we want a strong friendship with Israel based on shared values and our many close ties. Our condemnation of Hamas, a proscribed organisation, and the appalling attacks of October the 7th is unequivocal. Our commitment to the security of Israelis and the future of Israel is unwavering. We will continue to press for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of the hostages still held so cruelly by Hamas, a ramping up of aid to those Gazans in desperate need. The repeated threats by Hamas to the lives of the hostages are grotesque, and it prolongs the agony of their family and the loved ones. Hamas should release all the hostages immediately and unconditionally. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the situation in the West Bank cannot be seen in isolation from events in Gaza. Extremist rhetoric advocating forced displacement of Palestinians, denial of essential aid, the creation of new Israeli settlements in the Strip is equally appalling and dangerous. This government will never accept the unlawful transfer of Gazans from or within Gaza, nor any reduction in the territory of the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian situation remains catastrophic in Gaza. While Israel's ground and air operations expand, Gazans have now been pushed into less than 20% of the territory. Hospitals have been destroyed and damaged. The entire population of Gaza is now at risk of famine. Meanwhile, Israel's newly introduced measures for aid endanger civilians and foster desperation. They are inhumane. The Red Cross Field Hospital in Rafah reported last week that it has responded to an unprecedented 5 mass casualty incidents in the 2 weeks prior. In each case, Palestinians have been killed or injured trying to access aid in Gaza. Desperate civilians who have endured 20 months of war should never face the risk of death or injury simply to feed themselves and their families. We need further action from the Israeli government now to lift all restrictions on aid, to enable the UN and aid partners to do their work, to ensure food and other critical supplies can reach people safely wherever they are. We will continue to support the UN and other trusted NGOs as the most effective and principled partners for aid delivery. Our support has meant over 465,000 people have received essential healthcare. 640,000 have received food, and 275,000 have improved access to water, sanitation and hygiene services. We of course support the efforts led by the United States, by Qatar and Egypt to secure an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. We welcome France and Saudi Arabia's initiative to chair an international conference next week to advance a two-state solution. Mr. Speaker, it is a two-state solution that is the only way to bring the long-lasting peace that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve. But it cannot remain an empty slogan repeated by generations of diplomats and politicians, but increasingly divorced from the reality on the ground. Mr. Smotrich said, "There is no such thing as a Palestinian nation." Mr. Ben-Gvir has spoken of his rights in the West Bank, a territory his government is occupying, as being more important than the rights of millions of Palestinians. Their own words condemn them, Mr. Speaker. To defend those Palestinians' rights, to protect the two-state solution, to see Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in safety and security, this government is taking action. I commend the statement to the House.
Service Secretary State, Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Minister for his statement and for the advanced sight of it. The situation, as he has said, in the Middle East and the suffering we are seeing is serious and completely intolerable. And I would reiterate my remarks in response to the statement last week on the levels of desperation and suffering being completely unacceptable. We continue to see violence, deaths and casualties, and as the Minister has said, near aid distribution centres, which is simply incomprehensible, and that should simply never happen. Britain has continued to leverage its influence at every opportunity with Israel and with our international allies to change the course of events that the world is witnessing, to ensure that the remaining hostages are released, that aid reaches those who need it, and that a sustainable to the end of this conflict is achieved. We all want to see a better future for the Israeli and Palestinian people, and the UK must continue to play a leading role in achieving this. To do this, the UK needs to have a constructive set of channels of communication open with all our partners in the region and working towards peace and ending this conflict, including dialogue with Israel. The Minister will be aware that the sanctioning of individuals is always under review, that is the right policy, and in the case of Israel, this has been previously considered even by Lord Cameron, who's spoken of that in the last government. So would the Minister just explain the timings of this decision being taken today? And can he give an assessment on what their impact will be? He's mentioned already, and I've read the Foreign Office statement on asset freezes, travel bans, director disqualifications. They'll only have an effect in the right way by working with allies in particular. And the statement also refers to action being taken with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway. Can the Minister tell us what discussions he's had on this issue with other partners, including the United States of America, and their response? And with this decision and others taken, can the Minister give his honest assessment of the UK's government's relationship with Israel? Can he let us know what direct communication he and the Foreign Secretary have had with Israel on securing the delivery of vital, life-saving humanitarian aid to people in desperate need of help? On this side of the House, as he heard last week, we've been clear that settlement violence is not helpful at all. It's going backwards when it comes to delivering the two-state solution. And we again would urge Israel, for its part, not to take steps that could make the two-state solution even more difficult. We have consistently been committed to supporting a two-state solution, delivered in the right way and at the right time, and will work constructively to support every effort to achieve this. Mr. Speaker, while discussing the West Bank, can the Minister provide an update on the progress being made with the reforms, as he's touched on already, with the Palestinian Authority, following the MOU that was signed in April? The House will understand that credible governance is needed for long-term stability in the West Bank and in Gaza too, and of course that means with no future role for Hamas. And more widely on the conflict, the reports of the latest rounds of negotiation on hostage releases and bringing an end to the conflict are frustrating for us all and have not made the progress that we all desperately want to see. So can the Minister provide an update on the direct discussions he is involved in, including with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar and other allies in the region? The remaining hostages, as he has said, held in captivity of the Iranian-backed terrorists, they have faced over 600 days of suffering in horrific conditions, and securing their release continues to be critical to seeking to end this conflict. We all, Mr. Speaker, want to see aid get into Gaza, to the innocent Palestinians, the Palestinians that are suffering, the need for vital food, medicines and shelter. We have discussed this in previous statements, and I completely recognise and understand the difficulties associated in light of the challenging situation in getting aid in. So can the Minister provide an update on the amount of aid, the types of aid the UK continues to support and fund directly through partners, where that aid is currently located, and the efforts to get this aid in? The House will know, I said this last week in the statement as well, in response to the statement, my noble friend Lord Cameron, previously working with the Israeli government, secured aid by working with allies and the Israeli government, including the opening up of crossings and ports, increasing the number of trucks and volumes of aid entering Gaza. Can the Minister confirmed that he has spoken to or presented a clear plan to Israel, working with our partners on supporting more aid going in, increases of volume of aid, making use of our long-standing experience, because obviously Britain leads the world when it comes to getting aid and that expertise with a strong track record. And finally, can the Minister give any update on the actions being taken to restart the dialogue and discussions on the viability of the Abraham Accords, and on making progress when it comes to delivering the Cairo plan, which the House knows is so important? It is backed by local and regional allies and sees a really pivotal role when it comes to the Egyptian government playing that vital role for securing peace in the region, because these are essential conditions that we need for creating peace and stability and a better future for Israel and Palestine.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her questions. She raises important points about work with allies, and let me address the point on Egypt, which is vital. The Egyptians have conducted important work, and I will be pleased to be with them next week as part of the two-state solution conference to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza. The Right Honourable Lady is absolutely right that we need to be focused on how we can work with partners in the region and beyond to try and ensure that the vital building blocks can be put in place, both for a reformed Palestinian Authority but also a rebuilt Gaza. We can all see how acute those needs are. We have sought to work with partners, and I'm very grateful to the Speaker and to colleagues for their flexibility this evening for doing a statement in a slightly unusual way. We have sought to coordinate closely with the partners who are part of this statement. We are coordinating with others. We have had direct discussions with a range of other partners, including the United States, about some of these questions. We have spoken to the Israeli government directly today. The Right Honourable Lady invites me to comment on the state of the relationship between the UK and Israel. The state of disagreement, I think, is clear. I regret the tone of some of our exchanges most recently. We do not wish to have such a profound disagreement with the Israeli government, but as the Minister for the Middle East, when we do disagree as profoundly as we do, then I'm afraid I have to say so both publicly and privately, and that is what I have done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've long called for comprehensive sanctions on Israel in response to its crimes against the Palestinian people. So the sanctions against two far-right ministers are a step in the right direction. But Israel's war crimes are about far more than a couple of bad apples. So much more needs to be done. When Russia invaded Ukraine, over 2,500 sanctions were rightfully imposed on Russia. So I say to the Foreign Minister, isn't it now time for Russia-style sanctions on Israel to help stop the genocide?
Mr. Speaker, I want to be really clear that the two men where we have announced sanctions today do not represent the majority of Israelis. There are so many connections between the UK and Israel, and we hear about the extent to which the decisions, the rhetoric, and the language of these two ministers causes concern in Israel as well. So we are taking action on extremist rhetoric and extremist action which threatens the human rights of Palestinians, and that continues to be the threshold for these sanctions that we'll keep under review.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Colin Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. I want to begin by welcoming the step taken by the government today to sanction the extremist ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. It is only right that they face consequences for their relentless calls for the forced dispossession of Palestinians, which have so egregiously undermined prospects for securing a just and sustainable peace in the region. My party leader was the first to call for these sanctions last February, when their extremist views were already clear. My only disappointment, therefore, is that the Conservatives refused to act when they had the chance to do so, and it has taken this government nearly a year to take this important step. It's now essential that the government sustain steps towards a just resolution of the conflict, which must include getting the aid in, getting the hostages out, and agreeing an enduring ceasefire. In the last week, we have seen the product of the extremism advanced by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the deaths of more Palestinians who were queuing in desperation for food from the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Calls for Palestinian displacement can no longer be tolerated. So will the government build on today's progress by urgently considering sanctions on other extremist ministers who continue to call for the blockade of Gaza and expanded military action in the Strip, starting with Israel Katz? The time has also come to listen to members on all sides of this House and officially to recognise the independent State of Palestine. Will the government commit to taking this vital step at next week's summit in New York? Recognition will demonstrate the UK's commitment to self-determination, but also make clear that building on today's announcement, the UK will do all it can to wrest control away from the extremes and give both Israelis and Palestinians hope of a lasting peace.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his questions. The Two-State Solution Conference next week is an important moment. We're discussing with our friends and allies our approach to that conference, and no doubt I will return to this House with your permission, Mr. Speaker, next week to discuss further. I won't speculate on further sanctions from the dispatch box. We have taken these steps because of the extremist rhetoric, because of the damage that these two men have done to Palestinian human rights, and we will keep further sanctions to that effect under review.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the statement from the Minister. It is absolutely right to target the enemies of peace within the Netanyahu government, who are entirely separate from and different from the will of the Israeli people. I very much welcome the Minister's reference to supporting civilised societies within Israel and Palestine. And it is true that there can be no two-state solution, a top-down two-state solution, without building those communities. So will the Minister update the House on UK's proposals for an international fund for Israeli and Palestinian peace?
I thank my honourable friend and colleague from the East Midlands. He's long been committed to these issues, in particular the difficult work, but vital work, of ensuring that civil society in both Israel and Palestine work on peace-building projects. I know he was in the region recently, and I commend him for his approach. We hope to set out our approach to the International Fund following the announcements of the Prime Minister in due course. We want to make as full a contribution as we can to bringing peacemakers on both sides of this conflict together.
Sir Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, I have tried for 2 days to raise this through an urgent question. And when the Minister came to the dispatch box, I had expected to hear something constructive. What we've actually heard is the sanctioning of two people. The United Kingdom government could unilaterally recognise Palestine. The United Kingdom government could show the world a lead. And above all, the government could, as an absolute priority, negotiate the delivery of food and water and medicine to women and children who in Palestine are starving, through the route from Larnaca direct into Gaza. I asked him last week, I'll ask him again, when is the government going to do something?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. We have to, Mr. Speaker, in this House be focused on what are the real options for getting aid at volume into Gaza. The truth is they must be via land routes, and even when aid is in Gaza by land, it is still incredibly dangerous for aid workers. Ultimately, deconfliction mechanisms for aid workers in Gaza, should a full aid operation be allowed back in the Strip, will be vital. I met this week with the bereaved families of the victims of the World Central Kitchen operation. There are 3 British veterans, there are 3 British families still mourning the loss of their loved ones at the hands of the IDF when they were trying to deliver aid to the people of Gaza. If there was some other option to get aid into Gaza safely, we would take it. No such option exists. We have to negotiate access with the Israeli government, and that is what we seek to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the sanctions announced today, which are long overdue, but signify an important step forward. And I thank the Minister for his hard work and his strong statement on this issue. The Honourable Member for Early and Woodley and I were denied entry by Israel into the occupied Palestinian territories precisely because we spoke out against war crimes in Gaza and against annexation in the West Bank. Annexation is real, it is happening. Partners in the region are calling for recognition before it's too late. Today, the US Ambassador to Israel reiterated what many fear, that the US will not prioritise a Palestinian state becoming a reality in our lifetimes. Does the Minister agree with me that we must not throw recognition into the long grass, that failure to recognise next week at the UN conference implies that Israel does have a veto and that the Israeli government will continue to annex and terrorise Palestinians in the West Bank? If we do not recognise now, there will be no Palestinian state to recognise. So I ask the Minister, does he agree with me that we must recognise a Palestinian state at the UN conference next week?
I thank my honourable friend for the question, for her commitment to these issues. Clearly, recognition is right at the centre of any discussion of a two-state solution. The actions we have announced today are part of the UK's efforts to ensure that the reality of a two-state solution remains in play. It is clear from the rhetoric of the two ministers that we have sanctioned, as well as others in the Israeli government, that there is limited commitment on the side of the Israeli government to advancing that cause. The UK is committed to advancing that cause, and we will talk to our friends and allies in the run-up to the conference next week about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have absolutely no sympathy with the comments and the rhetoric of the two Israeli ministers the Minister has announced sanctions on. In his statement, the Minister said very clearly, and I quote, "We will not sit by while extremists wreck the prospects of future peace." So if the action he has just announced is not to be seen as a double standard, where are the sanctions against ministers within the Palestinian Authority who have incited violence and made vile comments of hatred against Jews and Israelis?
Mr. Speaker, as I am afraid I say with regularity, I won't speculate on further sanctions on either side of the conflict from the dispatch box, but the honourable gentleman is right. The thresholds and the tests are the same. We condemn anti-Semitic rhetoric, we condemn incitement to violence, and we'll keep all sanctions under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The sanctions imposed on the two Israeli ministers was long overdue, but it is a welcome first step. But I want to ask the Minister, as I continue to ask him and the Foreign Secretary, why are we still arming Israel? And when will we impose an arms embargo? When will we ban goods from settlements? And finally, he's already alluded to this, but the conference on the two-state solution in New York next week is a crucial moment in recognition of a Palestinian state. The Minister has the opportunity at this dispatch box, actually, to share with us across this House that the UK government is committed to recognising Palestinian statehood. Will he?
Mr. Speaker, I feel I need to take issue with the idea that this is the first step that this government has taken in relation to these issues. I've been at this. It's not in relation to sanctions either. This is the third set of sanctions we've announced in relation to settlements in the West Bank. In relation to the two-state solution conference next week, we are talking with our friends and allies, and I'm sure, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll be back in this House next week to talk.
Monica Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The President of the ICRC has said in Gaza humanity is failing, and what is happening in Gaza is surpassing any acceptable legal, moral and humane standard. Palestinians are being stripped of their dignity. When will he pronounce that they have a state? And given that Israel continues to blockade in, what more will he do? He talks about first steps. He needs to run.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't me who talked about first steps. We have taken a sequence of measures and we will continue to take measures. The blockade on aid into Gaza is reprehensible. I have talked about the famine that faces the whole of the Strip. The steps we have taken today will not unlock aid into Gaza. We will continue to advocate, press and take further measures until aid is unlocked into Gaza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand with my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central. She and I were denied entry to Israel only 2 months ago. Among the reasons given was our advocacy for the sanctions that the government has placed today. And I stand by my comments and I stand by the government's decisive action today. It's important, as the Minister mentions, that this action has been taken to uphold the rights of Palestinians, and the UK, along with its international allies, can take further action by recognising the State of Palestine. I ask the Minister what more he can do and what more all of us in this House can do to press our international allies together to come to that collective decision.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for my honourable friend's contribution. She went to the region to see with her own eyes, as she did repeatedly as a much respected journalist and author before she came to this House. I know her commitment to these issues, and I can assure her we are talking with the full range of our friends and allies about the approach to the two-state solution conference next week.
Can I welcome the Minister's statement, but could he tell the House whether he thinks these sanctions will save a single Palestinian life? And if he'll forgive me, ahead of the Palestinian Recognition Summit, rather than Two-State Solution Summit, maybe that was a slip of the tongue there by the Minister, next week in New York, some observers looking at the statement today might be suspicious that there is a sort of cynical coincidence of the timing of this statement ahead of that summit next week. So can he reassure the House and all of those that are very concerned about this issue that the United Kingdom government has not done some grubby deal behind the scenes with the American administration, trading this particular set of sanctions today and saying no to recognition in New York next week?
Mr. Speaker, I called the conference next week what it's called by the French and Saudi Arabian authorities who have called it. I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that I have done no deals, grubby or otherwise. We take sovereign steps on this. And Mr. Speaker, I'm asked by the honourable gentleman about timing. As I know many members will appreciate, working in concert with our allies, making a joint announcement of this kind requires some coordination. I was here last Wednesday and I was being asked, understandably, by many members when I would be in a position to announce further steps. I would like to have been in this position to announce further steps earlier than I have been, but we have always taken the view that it is most powerful to act with our allies. So we took the time in order to be able to work in concert with them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of us have been consistent in our calls for sanctions against those that commit war crimes in Gaza. So the sanctions placed on these two far-right ministers today are a step in the right direction. But let us be clear, this is nowhere near enough. Palestinians starve and aid is blocked in flagrant violation of international law, whilst the UK continues to allow arms exports to Israel. We cannot condemn the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza while continuing to arm those contributing to it. The government must act now and end all arms sales to Israel. Anything less is not just a failure of diplomacy, it's an absolute failure of moral leadership in the face of a genocide.
Mr. Speaker, let me be really clear for the House. We are not selling arms, not bombs, not bullets, for use by Israel in Gaza. We have a carve-out on the F-35 programme in order to maintain the programme which both us and so many of our allies benefit from. But where F-35 parts were directly being sold to Israel, that trade is suspended. We are not providing the weaponry that is being used in Gaza. And I want to reassure my honourable friends that I do not think, the government does not think, that the actions that we have taken today will be the golden answer to getting aid into Gaza. It will not be the golden answer for securing a ceasefire. We will continue to work on all of those fronts until we achieve progress.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while we welcome the sanctioning of both Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, this really should have happened a long time ago, and it now needs to go much, much further. But further to the previous question, today's announcement highlights the absurdity of the government's position, because the Foreign Secretary recently described those views as being repellent and monstrous, and today's statement accepts that Israel is guilty of human rights abuses and is in flagrant breach of international law. So on what basis, legal or moral, can the government continue to supply F-35 components knowing that the end user will be a regime that they themselves have condemned for espousing repellent and monstrous views, and who they now accept are guilty of human rights violations and are in flagrant breach of international law?
Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of time, I won't address the legal questions, not least given they're being considered by a judicial review. We are confident that the limited carve-out that we have done in order to maintain the functioning of the F-35 programme, vital to our national security and that of so many of our allies, is both legal and proportionate and moral, and we will continue to fight that case in the court.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome today's announcement. It's a huge and significant step which sends a clear message to the Israeli government. However, for millions of people in Palestine, in Gaza, they go to bed every night, if they can even find a bed to sleep on, unsure if they're going to wake up in the morning and whether their family members who might have survived so far will also wake up with them. So does the Minister agree with me that we must take the next vital step towards the two-state solution, which is for the UK to recognise the State of Palestine next week at the conference that France and Saudi Arabia are leading on?
Mr. Speaker, I won't repeat my answers about the conference next week, but I just want to... my honourable friend has been committed to these issues for a long time, and she is absolutely right when she says that millions of people are in an abject position, facing famine, terrible shortages of all essential supplies, and they weigh very much on the mind of this government each and every day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The two Israeli ministers that the Minister has announced being sanctioned are no friends of the Israeli people or the Palestinians. And I have no truck with them, and nor should any of us. But the reality is, of course, that we have two aspects here. That is Hamas control still of Gaza and their refusal to release the hostages or to agree to a hostage exchange, or indeed to allow aid in and to allow that aid to reach the Palestinian people, as well as the challenge of releasing those hostages, as we all want to see happen. They've refused the ceasefire deal. So what action is the Minister going to take to make sure that Hamas come to the negotiating table and actually negotiate a ceasefire so that the international aid can get in? And whilst I'm on my feet, what is the attitude of the government towards those that attempt to break the blockade, such as the Madeleine ship?
Mr. Speaker, I have called on Hamas to return to ceasefire talks when reports reached us that they were not doing so. I hope that those ceasefire talks are successful, and I, of course, repeat my call for hostages to be released. We have been clear about the blockade of aid, but I must once again reiterate that it is the land routes that we must be completely focused on. It is the land routes from Egypt, from Jordan, and from Israel itself which must be opened at the scale required to get the aid in the way required.
First of all, can I thank the Minister for his statement to the House, and can I thank the Government for their sanctions that they have placed. What I do want to understand, whilst I appreciate allies have to work together and it takes time to have these negotiations and put joint statements, which are, I agree, more powerful, I'd find it helpful to be able to tell my constituents and the country that actually what is the government's position going into those negotiations next week in America. Is the government's position, is the government's offer to say, yes, we should be recognised in Palestine immediately? And if it's not, then why not?
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the strength of feeling amongst constituents right across the country, including in the City of Lincoln. We go into the two-state solution conference clear in our commitments that the Palestinians have an inalienable right to a state which is safe and secure alongside Israel, and we're talking about, to our friends and allies, about the best method to secure that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's decision to sanction 2 Israeli ministers is certainly welcome. However, does the minister acknowledge that every limb of the Israeli state is carrying out a genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza? Sanctions must be extended to the entire state of Israel. Not tomorrow, not in a week's time, not in another 18 months' time, alongside a full arms embargo and the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He knows the long-standing position about determinations of breaches of international crimes. I want to be clear that our sanctions do not target the entirety of the Israeli people. They target 2 individuals who have been promulgating extremist rhetoric and action, who have breached the rights of the Palestinians. It is that breach of rights upon which we are focused.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been here almost every week talking about these issues. Although the sanctions are welcome, but every speaker is sending a clear message to the Minister today to recognise the state of Palestine. If we don't recognise the state of Palestine, there will be no Palestine to recognise. Now, the question for me is, what is preventing that recognition from happening, especially when the UK is amongst one of the 50 that is not in a position to be recognising Palestine? Do we need permission of Netanyahu to recognise Palestine, or anyone from his government to do that? Because if not, and we are independent of that decision, this decision should have been taken a long time ago.
I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that we don't need any permission for making policy decisions. If we did, I think the Israeli government would have a rather different attitude towards Britain's minister to the Middle East than they do. The position in relation to recognition is that we wish to provide a state in which Palestinians can live safe and secure side by side with the Israelis. Clearly, that looks distant at the moment for the reasons that the honourable gentleman says. Those reasons need to be addressed. We want to see progress, and we will consider our own position as part of the best possible way that we can make a contribution to those issues.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Sanctions are no remedy to the imperilled two-state solution. Is the Minister going to the conference with a plan?
The honourable gentleman always asks succinct and clear questions. I recognise, as the honourable gentleman will recall, I was a diplomat for a long time, and sanctions are no remedy. They are an expression of a failure in the international system, and we have heard, as my honourable friend has said, week on week about the agonies. We do go to the conference with a plan, but it is a conference called by our friends and allies, and we're discussing our approach closely with them.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I just congratulate the Minister and all his team and officials for all that they have done. I do not underestimate the amount of work that has gone in, especially working with international allies to get where we have. But as you can see, there's always demand for more, as there should be, given what we know is going on. So can I add my voice to everybody else who said that hopefully this is the lead up to next week and the successful announcement with our allies about the recognition of the Palestinian state.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her kind words, both about me but also about the officials of the diplomatic service who have worked hard, tirelessly. I was, as I said to another member, to another honourable member, I was hoping that we could make this announcement even sooner, and it is through no fault of the hard-working British diplomatic service who have done everything they can to try to ensure the most impactful sanctions announcement that we can.
Andrew George.
The two sanctioned ministers have been enabled by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is himself subject to an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. I wonder what the government are going to do to make sure that is properly pursued. While I was in the West Bank only a week after the two Labour members were shamefully deported from that country, it's very clear that the settlements are taking over the West Bank very significantly. So what sanctions will the government take to ensure there is no trade with those settlements?
The settlements are not bound by the trade preferences between the UK and Israel. They must be properly labelled. They attract different tariffs, and they should be traded as such. Where there are breaches of those regulations, they should be investigated.
Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the sanctions announced today by the Minister, taken in conjunction with our allies, and his commitment to a Palestinian state. However, people in Gaza are starving. I want to update the Minister on one such person, Dr. Roddy, the elderly and frail father of my constituent Mo Roddy. A few weeks ago, he sought shelter in Al-Awada Hospital with over 100 medical staff and patients, as he is a former practicing doctor there. There was no food allowed in. The IDF destroyed the main water tanks. The hospital was bombed, and when Dr. Roddy left the hospital, he was stripped and humiliated by the IDF. He is now hungry, ill, and alone, as the rest of his family in Gaza has been killed. What are we doing to protect the most vulnerable from dying by increasing aid, increasing evacuations, and ending the killing in Gaza?
My honourable friend describes a heartbreaking case of a family member of her constituent, which she's raised with me on a number of occasions, as have many other members across the House, and I usually not in a position to discuss those cases on the floor of the House. Where constituents and their families are affected, we will do everything that we can to try and support them. We've heard a great deal about the restrictions on aid, and it is candidly not easy to support people to leave Gaza, but where there is a UK connection, then I am always keen to do what I can to try and secure the safety of people.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome wholeheartedly the Minister's statement, welcome the sanctions, but fear that those who have just been sanctioned will either shrug their shoulders and say, so what, or worse, wear them as a badge of honour amongst their cohort. But casting forward to next week in the conference, I just want to ask the Minister, is he alert to and seized of what I think is a very significant development in this place, which is the very near unanimous support for a positive declaration from His Majesty's government towards a two-states solution and the recognition of Palestine. That is a very big step forward, and the nuance of the comments of my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, I hope is not lost on the Minister either. He will also know that right honourable and honourable friends from across the spectrum of the Conservative Party have written twice to the Prime Minister, urging that course of action and pledging that we would give wholehearted, full-throated, full support to that initiative. I just hope the Minister knows that when he and officials go to that conference, he is armed with the goodwill of this place to give some dynamism and impetus to this process, to recognise Palestine, to show leadership, and to use our good offices amongst our allies in the region to bring as quickly as possible this utter torture to an end.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm a proud son of the Labour Party and have often attended most to developments within my own party, but it has not escaped me the many forceful interventions from the opposite benches on these questions, the many powerful speeches, particularly from those who previously held other views. They are important contributions. I know they are watched widely by our friends and allies across the world, and indeed by many in Israel, and I take full and sober note of them.
Henry Tufnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for his statement and for his work that he's done and he continues to do on this issue. The people of Pembrokeshire watch in despair at the events unfolding on their TV screens, the death, the horror, the humanitarian catastrophe. And I would urge the Minister, as I add my voice and those of my constituents, that you need two states for a two-state solution. So when will the government recognise the State of Palestine?
I thank my honourable friend for the question, and I recognise the strength of feeling in Pembrokeshire and Lincoln and so many other places. I won't repeat for him the manifesto commitment upon which we were both elected. I'm sure his interest, like so many in this House, will be about the conference next week, and we, of course, are talking with our friends and allies about our approach to that.
Adam Dams.
An 11-year-old constituency wrote to me and simply said, "Why are we not doing more?" That sums up the outrage in Yeovil on the crisis in Gaza. So can the Minister tell my constituents what steps he has taken with allies to ensure all aid routes to Gaza are reopened and what consequences there will be if they're not?
The honourable gentleman's constituent asks a perfectly reasonable question, and I often feel in this House frustrated by my inability to say what we do diplomatically with our allies and partners, which I can't always advertise on the floor of the House as we're doing it. I'm sure it is obvious to many members that work was ongoing on this package of sanctions last week during the statement, and I understood the frustration from so many members, which I'm sure is shared by your 11-year-old constituent, that I could not say more then. I would like to reassure them and the House that whenever we are not in this place, we are working with our friends and allies behind the scene to try and reopen aid routes, secure the release of hostages, and ensure a two-state solution.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The sanctioning of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir is welcome news, not least because they are the loudest voices calling for annexation of the West Bank. But the settlement building and forced displacement of Palestinians is accelerating. Surely it is time to recognise Palestinian sovereignty over the 22% of Mandate Palestine that remains to them, before that too is entirely eaten away.
My right honourable friend makes, as ever, important and powerful contributions. I won't repeat the position on recognition, but we recognise the force of what my honourable friend says, which is that the situation has deteriorated. Settlements have increased very significantly over the last year, as has settlement violence, and it is unacceptable.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a sad day when the UK government, the governments of New Zealand, Australia, Canada and Norway feel it necessary to sanction government ministers in the State of Israel, one of our closest allies. But it's the right thing to do. Although, can I counsel the Minister, if I could be so presumptuous, against performative politics and ask him how many mouths will be fed, how much violence against Palestinians in the West Bank will be avoided, averted, and how much closer are we to achieving the two-state solution we all want to see as a result of the action that he has announced today.
The honourable gentleman can, of course, counsel me as my predecessor, and I'm grateful for his support on the measures we've taken. As I said to one of my other predecessors, I recognise that sanctions are not a remedy. This will feed no Palestinians, and I hope it will deter, but we have no guarantees that it will save any Palestinian lives. but we think these are important statements of principle and actions that demonstrate not just to the two individuals, but to Israeli society where we stand on these questions.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As you will know, many of us have urged this course of action on the government for some time now, and the imposition of sanctions on these two individuals and others in the Israeli government is something that is perhaps over time. However, I very much welcome the Minister's statement this evening and the hard work that has gone in to getting us to the point that we're now at. I understand the importance of working in concert with others, with our allies, but if the cooperation of our allies is not forthcoming, will the UK government, given the strength of feeling across the chamber, unilaterally recognise the State of Palestine?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't speculate too far on hypotheticals, but of course I'm a British minister. I take decisions on behalf of the British government. We will act alone where we have to, but we act whenever we can with our friends and allies. That is the way in which you have the greatest impact.
Kit Malthouse.
Deputy Speaker, the Minister laid out with some passion the dystopian hell that Gaza has become and the unfolding or ongoing disaster in the West Bank. So as many members said, why then has he done absolutely the bare minimum? We all know in this House, after the previous rounds of sanctions, that there will be absolutely no difference on the ground, as others have said, for the Palestinians. And I said last week, and I'm sorry to be cynical about it, that I thought the House was being played. My confident prediction now, given this announcement, is that recognition, which was being advertised for the conference next week, is now off the table. Can he tell me that I'm wrong?
I recognise that the honourable gentleman has made these points with some force for the last year, but I would caution him to be quite as cynical as he is. We are doing everything that we can. We recognise that what we have announced today will not be a remedy in the way that I've just said to one of my predecessors to the situation that we find ourselves, but I'd encourage him not to be casting such cynicism around the government's motives. This government cares deeply about what is happening in Gaza. We are so incredibly frustrated by the scenes that meet us, meet everybody behind me, and I would say gently to the honourable gentleman, he has no monopoly on the morality of this situation.